Now, the thing you need to keep in mind is you need to determine how much time you have available to work. So according to the FMCSRs, you have the 14-hour duty limit, you have a 11-hour driving limit, and depending on your company and which hours you fall under either the 60 on duty hour limit or the 70 on duty hour limit. And I'm gonna break down each of these limits. So the 14-hour duty limit, this means that you must complete all of your driving within a 14-hour period. And that means 14 consecutive hours after starting your shift. Now, you need 10 hours, consecutive hours, that means continuously off duty before you can drive again. Now, all the time adds up after coming on duty, which is driving and non-driving activities. That includes driving and non-driving activities. So stopping for lunch or taking a break during this time does not extend this limit. And unforeseen events, which is a vehicle breakdown or waiting for others or waiting a long time to load or unload your vehicle, does not extend the 14-hour limit. So the 14-hour period, that means you must complete all the driving within the 14-hour limit, and it does not exclude those things. For example, if you start your time at 6:30 in the morning, you may not drive a commercial motor vehicle after 8:30 p.m. Now, note, you must have at least 10 consecutive hours of off duty before you can drive again. Now, the 14-hour limit, this is the common misconception. The 14-hour limit only applies to driving. So the hours of service rules only limit to driving beyond 14 hours. You can still work after 14 hours, but you cannot drive a commercial motor vehicle after those 14 hours of being on duty. Now, a driver can do non-driving work or tasks past that 14-hour limit, but just no more driving. And note, the 14-hour limit is often misunderstood to mean that a driver must be released from duty after 14 hours. And no, that is not necessarily the case. You can still be on duty after those 14 hours, but that means that you cannot drive after passing your 14-hour limit. And in order for that to reset, you have to have at least 10 consecutive hours off. Now, whereas the 11-hour driving limit, that means out of the 14 consecutive hours, only 11 hours of your shift may be spent on driving. Now, anytime you're at the driver controls, which is operating a commercial motor vehicle, that is considered driving, even if you are stopped in traffic or roadway. So after 11 hours of driving time, you would need 10 consecutive hours of off duty before you may drive again. And then the 60-hour limit or the 70-hour on duty limits. The 60-hour limit, under this limit, that means you cannot drive a commercial motor vehicle 60 hours of on duty time in any 7 consecutive day period, meaning you cannot drive after being on duty for 60 hours within a 7 calendar day period. For example, a 7 calendar day period will be from Monday to Sunday. And note, if your company does not operate a commercial motor vehicle every day of the week, then that means you must follow the 60-hour on-duty limit. So that's the 60-hour limit. Whereas the 70-hour limit, you must stop driving a commercial motor vehicle after you've accumulated or built up 70 hours of on-duty time in an 8 consecutive day period. So meaning you cannot drive after being on duty for 70 hours within an 8 calendar day period. Now, for example, an 8 calendar day period is from Monday to that next Monday. Now, note, if your company operates a commercial motor vehicle every day of that week, then that means you may follow that 70-hour on-duty limit. And all driving and all on-duty time are counted towards your 60 or 70-hour limit. And that also means you cannot drive a commercial motor vehicle after you hit that 60-hour or 70-hour limit mark. Now, non-driving duties are allowed after you hit or reach that limit. And you're still allowed to perform non-driving duties after you reach that limit, and you may not be in violation. But those hours still must be added to that 7-day or that 8-day total, depending on which limit you fall under. So when you're using a 60-hour limit, you would add the hours worked, both on duty and non-duty driving, during that last 6 consecutive days. In other words, you'll add both on-duty driving and on-duty not driving during those last 6 consecutive days. And if the total hours is 60 or more, then you would have no driving hours for that next day. Now, the process is the exact same if you was falling under the 70-hour limit by adding the hours worked during those last 7 consecutive days, which will be, for example, today, plus the previous 6 days. Now, if the total hours is 70 or more, then you'll have no available driving hours for that next day, which is that 8th day in the calendar period. This is important. Now, note, the starting time for each 24-hour day is a company's decision, and that's usually midnight. Now, it must match the starting time of day that's used for your record of duty status. And all drivers at any one location must use that same time standard. This is a rolling period of 7 or 8 consecutive days. It is not a work week. For example, Sunday to Sunday for 8 days and Sunday to Saturday for 7 days. Now, you do not want to start over counting your total hours, because you never really start over in counting your hours. When you're counting your hours, what it does is the oldest day, when you're thinking about a 7 consecutive day or 8 consecutive day, the oldest day of hours just drop out of consideration as the each new day of hours are being added. So even though you reach the limit, that means you must stop driving on that given day. Now, you may be able to return to driving as soon as the next day begins, but you definitely want to be sure and really check your hours. Now, you must complete all driving, though, before you reach that 60 or 70-hour limit, even though you may continue to be on duty afterwards. Now, note, if you enter all on-duty hours on your electronic device, also known as ELD, it will track your time for you, and it will tell you how much time you have available for each day. So it will tell you how much time you have left for that each day. So that is one of the benefits of using an ELD, an electronic logging device. Now, when it comes to the 34-hour restart provision, so a driver may restart that 7 or 8 day period once a driver has at least 34 consecutive hours off duty. Now, you can reset your accumulated on-duty time by taking 34 consecutive hours off. So on-duty hours worked before that break no longer have to be considered when you're accumulating or building up your 60 or 70-hour limit. Your accumulated on-duty time actually gets reset back to 0. This is good. So after the rest break, the on-duty hours that were worked before that break no longer have to be considered or taken into account when you're calculating the driver's 60 or 70-hour limit. So this means that you can restart your hours no matter how many hours have been accumulated or built up against that 60 or 70-hour limit. This part is not mandatory, but it's a useful option, so that way you can preserve those hours so you can be able to stay compliant as you're driving on the road. Now, even if you exceed or go past that 60 or 70-hour limit, for example, if you're performing on driving work after reaching that limit, then you can still reset your hours with just 34 consecutive hours off. This means, for example, restart under this definition means resetting the 60 or 70-hour calculation at 0 after qualifying for 34 consecutive hours off duty. So if you've been off duty for 34 consecutive, that means continuously, 34 hours consecutively, then that means your hours of service will go to 0 and it will start over. This is a good tool to have, so that way you can be able to preserve your hours that you need, so you can be able to drive more hours on the road and you can stay compliant to the FMCSRs and all the other regulations as well. Now, the mandatory break provision, this is important. There are several times when a break from driving is required and it's mandatory. So the mandatory breaks, here's how it works. You may not drive if more than 8 hours of driving time has passed without any interruption in driving status, or at least 30 minutes. In other words, you must take a break for at least 30 minutes if you've been continuously driving for more than 8 hours straight. Now, depending on your hours, you have to keep in mind that spending at least 30 consecutive minutes off duty on whether it's on duty, not driving, that counts as this required break. Example, if you're in a sleeper berth or any combination of off duty, on duty, or sleeper berth time. So this counts as the required break when you're on duty, not driving. Now, off duty time, such as lunch break or rest in a vehicle, that counts as well as a mandatory break provision. So you need a break. You cannot just drive 9-10 hours straight without having some type of mandatory break, because as human beings, we drive a heavy, large commercial motor vehicle, and our bodies need those physical breaks as well as mental breaks when driving a commercial motor vehicle. So that's why this mandatory break provision is important, it's crucial. That's why it's in place to keep us safe and the people that we drive and the people that is around us. We keep everyone safe. So the on duty, not driving time, such as fueling your vehicle or doing paperwork, that counts as a mandatory break provision. And time resting in your vehicle, sleeper berth, that also counts as part of the mandatory break provision. Now, the consequences for non-compliance, meaning there are consequences. Every action that we take, there's always a consequence to it, be it good or bad. So there are consequences if you do not comply with the hours of service. So violating these rules have serious consequences for both you and the motor carrier. Now, the CSA basic scores. Basic stands for behavior, analysis, and safety improvement categories. So the CSA basic scores is similar or multiple hours of service violations that could add up to huge problems for the driver and the carrier under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety, Compliance, Safety, and Accountability, also known as the CSA program. Now, you and your company can both be reported and held accountable for violations. That's why it's important to stay compliant. You do not want to violate any of these violations or any of these requirements. So out of service criteria, this is if you can be declared out of service by law enforcement if you are violating certain hours of service rules. That means you can be declared or announced that you're violating the certain hours of service by law enforcement. Now, if you are declared out of service, that means that you cannot drive a commercial motor vehicle until you are in compliance with record-keeping requirements and hours of service limitations as well. Another consequence is fines, hefty fines. Violating these hours of service can mean hefty fines for both you and your carrier or the company. And these fines can cost hundreds and thousands of dollars out of your pocket, which is the driver and the motor carrier or company's pocket, depending on the specific violation. Hey, BET Trainer here. Listen, if you really had true value out of this video, go ahead and click that like button and share some honest comments about this video, because this is going to help other people as well see the video and get the value information, so that way they can be inspired by what you're doing right now as well. So also, if you want to get the latest updates, go ahead and click the subscribe button, so then you can be able to always be updated on the next instant video that will be put out. So again, go ahead and do that. And this video was sponsored by BET Life Services and CDL for Life.